And we are online. Hi, everyone who's watching this. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm here with the Distributist. Thanks for the live stream. The last one that we did was a bit of a mess, but I'm here today with the Distributist, and we're going to be talking about Catholic social teaching, distributism, and Christian socialism. So I'm going to hand it off to the Distributist to just tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I started a YouTube channel called The Distributist. It essentially goes over a lot of issues with modernity, a lot of problems in the modern world, mostly from a cultural perspective, but every now and again I hit on economics, try to explore some of other people's ideas on what really is ailing modernity and what some of the solutions might be. I come from a Catholic perspective, although my ideas are my own. I don't claim that most of my ideas are neither here nor there when it comes to church teaching. And I have a lot of sympathy for early 20th century ideas when it comes to economic organization, especially those listed by G.K. Chesterton, who is the channel icon, and Hilaire Belloc, who are the two people who came up with distributism, which, as far as I know, is more or less a old and defunct idea of an alternative to socialism. I think a lot of the theory that would be necessary to implement a distributist economy or something like that hasn't been developed. But I think there are policies that would really strike at some of the objectives, but I think they would be probably quite radical, more radical than I think what even most socialists think when they discuss reforms or even revolution.
Yeah, of course. I also come from a Catholic background myself. I just started this channel a bit. When did you start your channel? Can I just ask?
A year ago. Probably about a year, and I started it back in April or May of 2016.
Okay, so I started mine about almost a year ago, exactly 1 year anniversary of being on YouTube and of my official channel. I had just a little channel where I posted random videos, a real channel, and so. I've been raised Catholic. I've been Catholic my whole life, and I consider myself quite devout. I'm not, hardline, Deus Vult. I'll go fight a crusade for the church, but I'm religious. I believe in what the church teaches about God and Jesus Christ and the Bible, and I'm particularly interested in Catholic social teaching. And I think Catholic social made me look more towards alternatives to capitalism and has been a major influence on my socialist beliefs. So now that we've got that out of the way, I want to explain a bit more about what distributism really is and what maybe are some policies that you would do if you got into power tomorrow.
Distributism is essentially the idea that we try to force societal wealth downwards to the lowest, most local, most subsidiary level of society. This predominantly revolves around focusing power and wealth down onto families. Families in particular are sort of the unit that distributists are mostly interested in. And I think, if you're talking about policies, I think there's a lot of policies having to do with how people accumulate wealth. It's very easy in the society to accumulate consumer wealth and very, very difficult in the society to accumulate any kind of capital. And most people's capital comes in the form of social organizations. It comes in the form of familial bonds. It comes in the form of being able to invest in education. And it comes in the form of houses, real estate. It's very difficult to purchase this. If most wealth right now is being concentrated in about 4 or 5 areas of the society, and it's being drained right out of all the other areas of society. Moreover, we have a number of things, including mass migration, that are making it very, very difficult to create sort of cohesive communities in localized areas. So it's sort of like the perfect storm where people are becoming incredibly alienated from any organization that they can associate with. People are feeling less trust in their society, and as a result, no one's investing anything. Everyone's just spending stuff. They're spending it on iPhones, they're spending it on consumer products, and there's 1,000 excuses to spend money on things that are impermanent, and really no incentive to invest in the future. And that's what needs to be directly addressed. Now, you could do this by essentially making it very difficult for companies to organize themselves around central hubs. You could do this by wealth redistribution efforts, essentially giving it something a little similar to a universal basic income, although I think the details of that are a little bit sketchy. Implementing it's always very, very difficult. And I think you might be able to combine this with some land reform, which was the original distributist idea, right? Some of it a little bit comes into, you could also try to see if you couldn't break up a lot of how people deal with investment and investment management. It's always really
break them up thing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be. This is what I'm saying when I say you really need an expert to do this, because you can come up with 5 crackpot ideas about how you're going to restructure finance, capital, and investment banking. I mean, people study this for 20 years and they don't understand it, right? I mean, I can say that I think that we should have an incredibly high tax rate with an incredibly large child write-offs, right? I mean, one way I think that's oftentimes not explored to distribute wealth is for people to have more children. And it actually creates an incredible incentive for wealth being focused downwards, because there's once a person who's very wealthy, once Bill Gates has 5 children, right? His fortune is going to be split up instantly upon his death, even as he splits it up fairly. So he's going to cooperate in his own wealth distribution downwards. He's also going to be more invested in schools. He's going to be more invested in opportunities for the future. And right now, we have a bunch of rich people who don't have any children. I mean, the EU is ruled by rich people who don't have any children. They have no reason to care about things that happen after they die. They have every reason to get as much wealth out of the system right now. And that's how our system is set up. Our system is set up so that this generation is going to consume all the wealth, and there's going to be essentially nothing left over in terms of either social infrastructure or financial infrastructure for anyone who comes after my generation or perhaps even yours.
Yeah.
So I know you get into the particulars. I think, there's a lot to say probably. I have a lot of issues with left progressivism, as you might not wonder. I think essentially it assumes that it is against capitalism and the forces of globalization, but essentially it's a function of it.
Like what most self-described progressives or liberals, I'm assuming you're talking about, so when you say that.
No, like what?
Like when you say they're functionaries of capitalism, I'm assuming you're talking about maybe social democrats, guys like that.
And socialists. All of them.
All of them. Oh, wow.
Yes.
So,
of course.
From anarchists
to anarchists. I mean, these people. The thing is that they don't understand a few things, right? They don't understand that you can't destroy power. You can only replace it. So if you destroy all the institutions, then there's going to be another institution that comes in and takes over. And so if you just smash the family, smash the local government, smash anything you get your hands on, and all you're doing is inviting a larger organization to come in and take control. And, for instance, the greatest friend of corporations over the last 50 years has been the sexual revolution, right? And hard leftists had huge hands in creating that. And most people in Berkeley,
I personally have been
all these leftist places. I mean, they're yeah.
In terms of the sexual revolution, I diverge a bit on the issue of feminism and those things, and I'm probably going to.
I don't know, what is the issue of feminism?
Just feminist issues in general. Feminists have differing opinions on that, but I will say that second wave feminism in particular, which was the whole sexual revolution, all that, they really did. A lot of leftists have criticized them. Neoliberalism and paving the way for that. There's been a lot of criticism on the left from that. There's a really good article on Jacobin magazine about that. And I think that to some degree you are definitely right that it has been a major benefit to corporations in so many ways.
There's a reason why corporations are totally threatened by Che shirts and John Lennon Imagine posters. I mean, the world that John Lennon describes in the song Imagine is a world that's going to buy the new schlocky iPhone every year. They have nothing to live or die for except a new consumer product. I mean, and that's a creation that's the world that deracinated global entities, whether they're government or corporate. And that's another thing. I don't really distinguish between the two of them in terms of power. I don't think they're fundamentally different. That's the kind of world that these large organizations are really going to benefit from. Individuals that don't have any associations, individuals that are just floating in the ether of, this utopian vision. It's not the corporations embrace this not just because it's cool. They embrace it because it benefits their bottom line.
Yeah. But of course, I'm good. Unlike some you've other leftists that you've spoken to, I'm not I don't advocate the Vanguard Party. I don't advocate really even Marxism. Even though I have a copy of the Communist Manifesto and selected writings by Marx here, which I was hoping I would try and get into the shot, just as a little decoration, but also maybe reference later. I'm not as comfortable with those as I am with, so I base a lot of my ideas of socialism on that. And so I personally think that instead of their view of an eventual communist state or anarcho-communism, I think a market socialism perspective option would be better. Maintain the state, significant reforms, of course, because there are obvious problems. But the overall thing that I focus on is the economy and how we restructure the economy from the current corporate of worker ownership and worker self-management through things like cooperatives, workers' councils, things of that nature. And then we would, and that would bring about a more just society by, as workers would then be able to distribute wealth among themselves rather than it being distributed capitalist by the owner of the business.
Marxism and Christian socialism are sort of they sound sort of similar because they're sort of both radically redistributist, but they're philosophically so far. I mean, Marxism is a creation of Hegelianism, which is a radically.
Is it what?
I would consider Hegelianism to be a radically counter-Christian philosophy.
Yeah, I am not.
Hegel saw it that way, but I think
I have never read Hegel. I'll be honest. I add that to my reading list. I should really do that.
Very few people have actually. I've read little excerpts and summaries, but I've read I've talked enough about it, and I have a friend who's like a foremost scholar on Hegel. So, but I think philosophically, they sort of superficially look different in the way that maybe a shark and a dolphin do, but they're not very similar animals when you ask how they evolved, what they're really about, how their life cycle works. They just happen to sort of look the same way in this particular time. I think, you're talking about like workers redistributing wealth. That's another thing, right? Individuals don't distribute wealth away from themselves. That's not something that humans in their nature do. Institutions distribute wealth. So the question are what kind of institutions you want to set up that control the flow of wealth, because no one really takes capital away from themselves and gives it to somebody else very far away from them. It usually is because there's a bond pulling him to do so. Now that could be a bond of love, it could be a bond of compulsion, but in it, man qua man, totally disassociated from any kind of connection to anybody else, which frankly in the Marxist conception of the universe is how man exists. He does not himself distribute power away from his locus of control.
Okay.
So that's another difference, right? Is that I'm fundamentally more pessimistic about the nature of man.
Definitely.
The problems we have with organization, they don't come from corporations. They don't come from companies. They don't come from markets. If you took companies and nationalized them, the problems of those companies would then become national problems.
To some degree, definitely. But I would again, you are definitely pessimistic. And that probably, I'm assuming, is with your pessimism, would you say that is related to the concept of the fall of man?
Oh, certainly. And I think that it's related to the fall of man, but I'm a convert, right? I'm not a cradle Catholic like you.
Yeah. That's a new term. I need to use that more often. I had never heard that term before. I need to use that.
Cradle Catholic?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, people use it all the time. Where I come from, I guess maybe it's a West Coast thing, but I'm not a cradle Catholic. I went through a specific thought process. So when I say that my understanding of human pessimism is due to the fall of man, listeners might understand the causality wrong. I didn't wake up as a Catholic and decide that the fall of man can tell me to take a pessimistic view. I saw Catholicism being prophetic about the pessimistic view of man. I think that an honest examination of social science and history will tell you what kind of creature a man is and how he behaves in institutions. And at this stage, we have so much history and so much history about socialism itself that it just seems inescapable to me.
Actually, for a course that we had at my college called read St. Augustine's Confessions, and we had to learn quite a bit about the fall of man and that concept. And I do think that there is about the sinful nature of man, but I do think that, like, I'm not an absolute optimist that people are, necessarily fundamentally good. I am maybe a bit more of a realist on that I think, people can be good or bad, depending on, circumstances, them, et cetera, et cetera.
That is the optimistic perspective, right?
Oh, okay. I'm not a philosophy student. I'm a political science student.
We can take the institutions and the environment of man and switch him from being a bad animal to a good animal by changing the environment.
Well, I wouldn't say that even then you're a good animal, because even there is an old proverb that goes, "There is no rose without a thorn," and even people that do great things can do very terrible things. Thomas Jefferson helped write the Declaration of Independence and the founding of our country, but he was a slave owner. He was who raped his slaves. He did. He had good things about him, but he also did bad things as well. And I would say there's like with politicians, I don't agree with them on anything reason, and I often have to look beyond personality for that reason as well. So that's just something on that. And I completely lost my original train of thought.
But you think
there.
Politics is going to bring forward some kind of social reform, and I guess what do you sort of hope to see through this social reform? It's going to be some like large tax and direct redistribution.
No, no. The tax, yes, there would be a need for tax. I don't see that as being the path to socialism. And I like to reference quotes a lot.
Can I ask you a question? What do you mean by socialism?
I should have actually laid that out. Unlike Marxists, I tend to use a more generic definition of socialism, which is simply a socioeconomic system based on ownership of the means of production.
Who has the ownership?
They're socially owned. So this could be cooperatively, collectively, or by the state. So I encompass a wide.
They're owned by the state.
What?
So they're owned by the state is what I'm hearing.
As what? I personally prefer cooperative ownership, which is.
I don't understand what cooperative ownership means. Is the problem?
Okay, this is. Actually, there's a good. If you want to learn more about this, this book here, "Democracy at Work: A Cure for Capitalism" by Professor Richard Wolff. It's a and this has been a major influence on my.
Do you mean they're owned by the workers essentially?
Yes.
Like at the locality.
Yes, they're democratically owned and operated. One distributist one thing founded on distributist policies actually is a co-op that I often point to is the Mondragon in the Basque Country in Spain, which is the world's largest co-op. But then there's many others. Isthmus Engineering in, I believe, Wisconsin. I'm not. And actually, when I was in the West Coast a few years ago, are you in Oregon or Washington? Can I just ask? Or California?
I'm in Washington, but I move between states every few months. I seem to get a lot of different jobs.
Well, when I was in Oregon, actually, with my family on vacation, restaurant and bakery, and it's a worker-owned co-op. The workers there own the company themselves on a democratic basis. It's not like stocks where if you they on the nature that they work there, control it entirely.
I actually, it might be surprised, but I actually lived in the co-op for 2 years.
Oh,
when I was I used to be a progressive. I lived in a co-op for 2 years.
A housing co-op, I'm assuming you're talking.
Yeah, housing co-op. It was, you did all the work collectively. It was like high rent, and then you collectively bought things for the house.
I have very little experience with housing co-ops, to be honest. I'm more familiar with worker co-ops as businesses. Housing co-ops in that nature is not something that I'm super familiar with, I'll be honest. I do want to learn more.
I think, cooperating for a business where workers own things is a great idea. I think it hasn't, these businesses haven't tended to compete well against more centrally directed businesses generally.
That we'll actually probably touch on later, so yeah.
But I think that's a great idea if they can get off the ground. I think it would be an interesting experiment. I think for my money, if something is small and localized, I'm not so sure if it needs to be actually owned by the workers who are there, or whether here's always the thing, right? Because like if you're a small business owner and you have 20 employees,
Yeah.
The small business owner is probably going to be just like it's a small town business, right? The small business owner is probably going to be marginally wealthier than the workers who work there. But at the same time, if you paid the workers in terms of the stock of the company, which is essentially what you'd be doing if it was a co-op, right?
Pay workers in what?
If you paid the workers in stock of the company, right? Which is essentially what you'd be doing.
Not exactly. That's
actually, it's one way or the other. It's that, right?
A bit more complex than that. Like the stock concept is more commonly with ESOPs, and now I'm getting into some business. It's more they own an equal share of the company as as everyone else, and they receive in return, which is I'm trying to think, like they decide compensation in a democratic manner, and they receive in return based on the wealth they created.
So the issue here is that if you have like a mill or something like that, like a very small operation that's got 30 employees, like some of the last remaining mills in Washington State, they have very small numbers of employees because most of it's automated. The expertise of how the company is run is not uniformly distributed. You've got a few managers who know how to run the plant, so you're not going to vote on anything meaningful in terms of how the plant's run.
Like you can do this through direct democracy. Like if you need, like for management and stuff, those would probably need to be elected positions, and like people would be.
You're cutting out a lot. Are we doing all right here? I wonder if the chat's saying this.
I lost the chat actually on here. To pull it back up because I'm doing this on two devices to try and minimize my screen usage. Nothing on the chat. To be honest, but I haven't seen anything on the chat out there.
I'm wondering if people who are listening are hearing the cutouts. But let's just continue. I guess at the point where you're not voting on business decisions, then what decisions are you voting on in terms of the company? Right.
The main thing would be, of course, the way the wealth is distributed in the.
Wouldn't it be distributed equally according to the shares of dividends?
The share. No, they would be
equal shares of the company. They all equal share of the profit, right?
No, it would be they have an equal say, is what I mean. Like in terms of a political democracy, every person has one man, one vote. That's the main concept of that. And my lighting is really reflecting.
I guess I would wonder. So hypothetically, someone could have all of the wealth of the company voted to him, even though he only owned a fourth of the share, or 1/20th of the shares. That seems strange, I guess.
Someone could own what?
I'm not sure. All the wealth voted to him, like through a democracy.
No, there would be like internal structures. I'm not saying absolute, complete absolute democracy without any structure. No, there would be structure, and it would be on first what they contribute and their needs. So from each according to his contribution to each according to his need is a common way that's been described.
So is it democracy or is it by that rule? Because democracies rarely operate by that rule. In the
context of cooperatives, that's typically the way that they operate.
That's not my experience living in a cooperative. My experience living in a cooperative is that people formed into parties, and there was a political system where people contended to get a bigger share of the pie, like human beings actually do in real life.
Like I can't co-op, and I don't know what I don't know what that one was. I'm only talking about like this one sounds more like a housing type co-op.
I know. I'm talking about human behavior. I'm talking about human behavior.
Well, I'm talking about your specific example.
I'm going to say if you had a direct democracy, there's all sorts of things that are run direct democracies. Do you see humans defaulting to this? And this is why I'm saying like human nature being fundamentally good. You think you're going to put actual humans into a voting system, and they're going to reproduce everyone receiving according to their need and giving according to their ability?
you give what you can, and you need is basically the fun. Like that's not exact. Like each according to his contribution. This is more about.
Maybe they're all in a family together, right? Like if these people
Really,
are all very close friends, or if they're in a very close family, you might see that behavior. But you're talking
yes.
about behavior that we only see in family units, pretty much.
I can't hear you. You just cut out.
We're talking about behavior that we've only sociologically observed in very tight-knit communities, in very small groups of people where they all know each other. We don't observe this behavior in general populations of humans, especially humans in large population areas.
What? You're cutting out a lot. Sorry.
Okay. Do you want me to switch my microphone?
It may just be a.
You're cutting out a lot too, frankly.
I am. Okay, I'm going to reduce my bandwidth setting to.
You might want to kill the video too.
Yeah, I'll just. Let's see if that works. Is that better?
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess you tell me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So the issue, I've kind of lost my specific comment, but we have not sociologically observed humans to exhibit the kind of behavior you're looking for outside of family units and very cohesive arrangements of people less than, say, about 80 people who all know each other and who work with each other every day, right? Hunter and gatherer societies oftentimes behave like this. Extended families sometimes behave like this, but we haven't seen this behavior in groups of people who are much larger than 150 people or outside of very tightly knit family arrangements.
Like, I would just say that for the example of cooperatives, you actually do observe this outside of those. I need to get the exact numbers here, but how many does Mondragon? It has its own problems, I'll admit. I keep referring to Mondragon, and I probably shouldn't. But they have 7,435 employees as of 2015. I don't know exactly how many. And what they do, from what I understand,
you would say that Mondragon votes every time to distribute the wealth according to need and to weigh wealth according to ability.
Contribution, not ability. You receive enumeration based on need and what you contribute is what it is.
I mean, that's always contestable. People contest that, right, in practice. I guess I would ask. I mean, I first of all, I would wonder how we would even measure Mondragon doing that, right?
Like, again, I don't know exactly, like, the exact thing, like some of the exact info on Mondragon, but I'm doing terrible right now.
But I think the thing is, what you're saying is that if we create arrangements of co-ops like this, people will start treating strangers like most people only treat their families.
Like, one could argue, although I would say it probably worked better than some of the discussions we have in my family.
So better than they treat their families.
In the case of my, there's an attempt at a joke.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, but that's my attempt at a joke too. I mean, but it's sort of serious, right? I mean, that's when you boil down all this about this co-op here in Spain 80 years ago and that co-op in Mexico 30 years ago, it comes down to that. That's what you're asking me to sort of like really believe in, right? And you're asking me to believe that with arrangements of co-op worker production, workers are going to behave very differently than they behave in the present environment.
Well, they do. We can observe this now.
Pardon me?
We observe this now in the status quo. We observe we observe in various worker co-ops in Mondragon in Spain, Isthmus Engineering, and the thousands of other worker co-ops around the world, that we do see that rather than the cutthroat model that currently exists in privately held corporations, we do see more cooperation. Avoid the very bad pun there. We do see higher levels of like we do see workers empathizing. We see them.
How do you measure that?
How do we measure that?
Empathizing.
That's. I really need to take some sociology classes on this. Just like we see that, like in terms of their, like in the.
People are going to these things who are, inclined towards believing this, and they're like, well, they empathize more, and it's. I think if you go to, I'll give you an example of something that I believe certainly. Like, let's talk about the Putin effect, right? Which is one of my chief contentions that I usually bring out against people broadly on the left, right? We know that societies are less cohesive when they're more diverse. People trust each other less. They do things. There's been numerous studies.
What is the name of the effect?
The Putin effect.
Putin.
Yeah, it's by author Robert Putin, who wrote the very famous book Bowling Alone. But this study has this Bowling Alone. Bowling Alone.
Okay, Bowling Alone. I'm going to Google
it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That study, it examined the breakdown of cohesiveness in American society, that specific book. But later academic papers that Robert Putnam published demonstrated that one of the most persistent effects that could explain the social breakdown was an increase in diversity. When societies get more diverse and they get more differentiated, people begin to trust each other less. And he measured this. It wasn't some kind of subjective model. He measured this by going to societies and seeing what people reported about their trust in other people through surveys. He looked at the participation people did in volunteering activity, the participation people had in organizations that brought them into cooperation with other people outside of their family. And in every instance, you could see societies, as they got more diverse, got less cooperative. So that's a study that I think you can literally look at the statistics and see, okay, from these specific measurements, we see this effect. I would be interested. I think that if you made something smaller and more local, I think it would get more cooperative. But I guess I'd be highly suspicious.
Co-ops by nature tend to actually do that. So
well, yeah, but I think in that instance you might be right. If Mondragon, you said it was like 8,000 people or something like that, right? 80,000. Okay, well that's. How many factories did they have, right? Like because the corporation I worked for had like I don't know how many tens of thousands of people it had, but it was enormous, right? You never most of the time you walk around the factory, you never recognize people you walk by for the most part. And if Mondragon runs the situation where most of the people working together on any given day know each other, well, then I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they're more empathetic. But in that case, the empathetic has to do with the fact that the institution is more localized, not because it has this collectivized democratic way of running the system.
Now, okay, well, I'm going to respond to this, then I'm going to steer us in another direction if you don't mind.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah. But from what I understand about Mondragon and many other co-ops, I also forgot there's this region in northern Italy that also about a third of their GDP is produced from co-ops, and we're now these.
Pardon me.
More people are showing up. I just looked down for a sec.
Yeah, we got 5 people.
Yeah. From what I understand, they tend to devolve a lot of the decision making out to various departments, and each its own decision making, and then as to the concerns of that own one, and then they elect delegations to manage the entirety and maintain that it works as a whole from each one. So it has both direct and representative democracies operating within it, from what I understand.
Oh, I think experimenting with this stuff is great. I personally, I think another difference is I have very little faith in democracy. If it works for given situations, it's fine. But in my experience, democracy produces as many selfish and short-sighted decisions as just putting somebody in charge does.
Well, here's like it has been. Noam Chomsky said the problem is that it doesn't always go the right way, and that is its fundamental flaw. And actually, I'm just going to check what the chat is saying real fast to be sure the audio is going well. Okay, there we are.
You still there?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just need to check how the chat was going. What was I saying? What was I saying? I'm sorry.
About democracy and whether whether it guarantees good decisions or whether it's better at making decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, God, I got sidetracked there. It does have a it is not. There is no perfect system. I said earlier there is no rose without a thorn, and like all systems, this one democracy has thorns of its own. But I would say that it's the only system in which your individual selfish concerns cannot dominate the entirety of the concerns there, and you have to balance it with the concerns of the others. That's another issue in of itself, though.
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that, though.
Okay. Well, I kind of want to steer this back to the subject of Catholic social teaching. Okay. Some interesting comments in the chat that I will.
Well, how about we address
have to discuss later
on?
Yeah, I was saying later. Yeah, but one of the points of Catholic social teaching that I personally find very interesting is the discussion of the rights of the workers and the dignity of work. And before we go any further, let's first address the issue of wealth is created in society.
Well, that's complicated, right? There's various economic theories.
What would you say? Like, I argue that all wealth, like so to speak, all wealth derives from the workers is the common system.
I mean, that the way you're phrasing it is sort of. In some sense, it does. In some sense, it doesn't. Right? I mean, at a basic level, wealth is the fulfillment of a human desire. Right now, whether that desire isn't getting fulfilled because the work isn't getting done, or it's not getting fulfilled because the information isn't getting distributed, is an open question. So I don't think that you can just say like, well, the wealth comes from the worker. I'm not so sure even what that means.
I'm talking about like material wealth here. I'm talking about
things like about material wealth too, right? You can have people do a lot of work and generate no wealth. I mean, the Great Leap Forward demonstrated that. You can have people do a lot of work and generate functionally no wealth.
Who demonstrated that?
The Great Leap Forward.
Now, I try to avoid being an apologist for, for the tanks as much as I can. But I will say this: the Great Leap Forward, while it did have significant issues, there were some major advancements that were created by that, and there
were advancements at the expense of tens of millions of lives.
Yeah, I acknowledge that.
And the advancements. I mean, if you compare the Great Leap Forward to something like the economic boom post the Meiji Restoration, I don't know how the
Meiji Restoration was Japan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you're saying let's look at an Asian society industrialized, right? You see an industrialization process occur over a similar time frame, much less destructively, with much fewer loss of lives. I don't know how you can read about the Great Leap Forward and think it's a success.
I will confess
only in isolation of an understanding of history, right? I mean, I guess people think it's what?
Political science major. I'm also a history major as well as a political science major, but I have not actually studied a whole lot about the Great Leap Forward. Admit to that. I've tended to focus a bit more of my studies on the West and also and some degree on Russia. Europe and the US has been my main focus of study.
Okay, but as it pertains to the thesis, do we understand that you can work really hard and not generate wealth?
Work really hard and create no wealth? Hypothetically, yes. But
hypothetically?
The information on the Great Leap Forward to comment on that specific example.
No. This has nothing to do with the Great Leap Forward. This is just a general. I mean, I don't know how much experiences you have with work, but the times I've been working hard have not been necessarily the most productive times. Oftentimes I'm doing something for the wrong reason or in the wrong direction, or I don't understand what the goals are, and you work really, really hard and you just end up with crap at the end,
right? You can have unsuccessful examples of work can be unsuccessful. I will most definitely concede to that.
Okay,
so I will definitely agree.
But then we see that you can't in fact reduce work to purely labor, because there's an informational dimension of communicating where the demand and how much the demand exists.
I'm not saying that all. Oh God, the screen is my screen keeps going out.
It seems like you're having really bad
all wealth
problems.
results. I'm saying that all wealth results from work. Yeah, I'm having a problem with the.
Are you saying that work is some amount of work is needed for wealth to be created? Like it's necessary but not sufficient?
Like I'm saying that for wealth to be created, there must be work. I'm not saying that all work, but all wealth is the result of work.
So you're saying that work is necessary but not sufficient for wealth to be created, right?
Is necessary but not sufficient.
It's philosophical terms, right? So it's like if only if sort of deal.
Yeah, I guess. I'm not. Again, philosophy is a subject that I'm not super educated on. I need to do some more reading on philosophy. I'm more informed on politics and political economy.
Okay,
and
so
history.
I guess I could say that in some sense, wealth, for most cases, requires at least some work to produce.
Yes, absolutely.
And by work, we've defined as time being spent doing an activity.
Time, effort. Time
and effort. I think that's a good way of defining.
That's a way that I would.
Some time and effort, but the amount of human desires satisfied and the relative amount of time and effort are not consistently matched up. There's not a linear relationship between those two quantities. And therein lies the problem with saying that wealth is related to labor so directly.
Okay, so sort this out in my head. You're saying that just because there's work does not mean that will fulfill human desires.
Precisely, yes. You could work a lot and produce very little fulfillment of human desires. You could work a little and produce an incredibly large amount, right? For instance, there might be a reservoir of rare earth minerals under my floorboards of my house, and then one day I'm carrying a bowling ball or something, and I drop it and it smashes, and I discovered a deposit of rare earth minerals, and there's more rare earth minerals here than and some surveyor in like Africa spent 10 years searching for much smaller reserves of rare earth minerals, and I've essentially accomplished as much by an accident as he ever accomplished by his toil, right? The relationship is not consistent, which is what makes the management of this property very difficult.
So just because the man discovered it, that does not mean that the wealth was created, is what you're.
I'm saying. Or how about this? Like I could simple ass backwards on a brilliant equation, right, with no effort. And that equation could, it could be the equation for cold fusion, right? And then instantly a huge fulfillment of human desire is created. But I just like accidentally, did something on the calculator and it came out, right? It could be totally accidental and involve very little effort and work. Whereas somebody could work for 100, their entire lifetimes and that problem never come out with anything, right?
I think I get what you're saying, but I think there were like you're talking about cold fusion things I'm not talking about like intellectual discoveries. I'm talking about like this laptop that I'm speaking to you through.
Which is an intellectual discovery, I assure
Well, yes.
you.
However, it was the iPad that I'm looking at the chat through. This was not like Steve Jobs did not create that. Did this was made the wealth that was
Lots of people did.
Yes, and it was the Chinese factory laborers that actually made this iPad itself. One worker can.
Well, no, it wasn't because it wasn't because it contains a Motorola chip from Korea. It's probably assembled in Mexico.
I was again. I'm
it
very
has
much
rare earth minerals mined in China and Africa.
Yes.
I mean, I can keep on going here, right?
Yes.
But the thing is that you don't understand. Also, you don't understand that the coordination of those elements to be put together into the iPad, it is also an intellectual feat. The management of those factories so they have reliable products is also a technological feat, right?
I do it. Like, I'm not saying we should completely.
For instance, I worked in a factory as an engineer for a semiconductor manufacturer for 3 years, and I assure you that it's not mindless work.
Oh, I never said. I would not say it is at all.
Okay, so we have intellectual discoveries going on at every stage of the process, at every level, that transcend merely effort and time, right?
Yeah.
So it is sort of equivalent. I mean, granted that the discovery of cold fusion would be a simplification of that, right? Similar processes like that are going on at every stage of the supply chain, right?
Like, yes, like again, there is more to be put into all this. Like, as you said, the Motorola chip that was made by one worker in one country, the materials that went into that was mined by another miner in another country. Like, so multiple workers go into this, but it was still their labor that helped to produce that wealth.
But it was also the intellectual insights at every step of the supply chain as well, right?
I would classify that to some degree as labor.
But as we've shown previously, the intellectual efforts vary massively in their ability to output wealth. I mean, if I just gave a fully functioning, assembly part factory to Mexico and you wouldn't know how to run it, even if you had like 5 advisors, right? It's a very difficult thing.
I'm not saying that we should get rid of experts or that we wrote, some form of management. I'm just saying that we will need that for the role of the workers themselves, their management, managed by themselves, by other workers.
You're trying to boil the iPad down to the effort and time that went into it. But what I'm saying is that to a large degree, it also has to do with the intellectual decisions that were made to actually produce it and the ability to coordinate the time and effort of all the parties involved. And that's what makes the iPod not reducible to the time and effort that went into it.
Like the coordination, I would include that as part of the time and effort that went into its creation.
But like I said, like all intellectual products, you cannot characterize coordination by time and effort.
We're getting
just like you can't classify theories by time or effort too, right? Like I've got a bunch of theories for why cold fusion will work, right?
Yeah.
To figure out which one's right, let's classify them by how much time and effort went into producing them. That's not how it works. Good coordination is not a product of time times effort. And good decisions on the factory level are not products of time times effort.
I think we're thinking on 2 different wavelengths about this one. I'm honestly a little confused.
I think that this is a fundamental economic disagreement. I think it's the 19th century view of labor, personally. I think the labor theory of value is simplistic, and I don't think it ever was true. And I think that if you look at modern supply chains, it immediately becomes apparent.
I disagree on that one, because as I've said, there is after 50. How much work does?
I mean, well, like, are you going to be a writer, right? Would you characterize how good articles are by the amount of time and effort to produce them?
I would not characterize that in and of itself.
Well,
I don't think that like, for me, labor theory value, I don't judge labor theory value based purely on like the exact. I conceive it as primarily just a view of wealth creation. Again, I'm not a Marxist in that sense. Are, yes, determined more by supply and demand in that regard. But
I mean, supply and demand at least explains something, which is why, I mean, there's problems with supply and demand purely. It's also simplistic, but it does actually have explanatory power, which I find that the labor theory of value has vanishingly little predictive power. I don't even know what you'd use to predict with it, right?
Nothing predictive.
Nothing predictive?
It's not meant to be predictive. It's
well, then it's not scientific, right? Strictly speaking. The way you validate science is it makes predictions about the world, and then you test those theories by the predictions it makes.
Like, again, I'm assuming your background is in like
engineering.
Actually explains quite a lot. I'm a political
engineering.
Yeah, this actually explains quite a bit. I'm like the social sciences, for which LVT is associated. Like, things are, not say computer science or engineering. Again, I'm not an expert on the philosophy of science. I'm trying to actually steer this back to the topic of discussion if I can.
No, you control the.
It's not.
Go for it.
Yeah. So let's just move on if we can. But
go for it. Yeah.
One of the points of the in relation to the is in relation to the dignity of work and the rights of the workers. And one point, which I really wish I had the book on that right now. It says workers have a right to the fruits of their own labor, which is why I kind of need to discuss this first point with you. But
I agree with that. Yeah, I think we're on a common ground again, right?
Yeah. So, like, using my personal example, I work at a grocery store. That's where I work. You probably won't know it, but for any of you guys who are in the Midwest, second, the name of the store is Hy-Vee. And like, I'm not working in the supply chain. I'm just working at the cash register. So my work there, people wouldn't be able to check out. That's basically, I do LVT down quite significantly, but that's really it. My role is just ensuring that the wealth that has already able to be transferred into exchange value, and the exchange can go forward. That's still a part of the wealth creation process.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm trying to get all my thoughts straight. And it's the end of the day. But the whole, like, the fruits of my labor in that may not be as as massive as, say, the guy who farmed the wheat that went into the bread, or the guy who baked the bread, but they still added they still were a part of the process. Mm-hmm. So would you say that I myself do have a right to compensation based on the profits generated thanks to my labor?
I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by a right. I think you have a right to compensation in accordance with the value you provide to others. And I think potentially you even deserve more compensation than what you're getting. I guess the word right is a little bit confusing in this context. But, well, I don't know. I mean, can you clarify what you're really looking for? Like for instance, I always bring this up, right? But
yeah.
I can't pay you an ownership over the direct profits, because the profits don't manifest themselves directly. They manifest as stock, stuff that has risk, and private citizens can't accept that level of risk, right? Which is the problem, right? Large corporations can accept the risk for the additional expected value of the product, right? But I need compensation now, right? So part of the fact that you're not actually getting all of the wealth that is, manifest in this large groceries chain is due to the fact that part of it is the fact that you're paying for not getting exposed to risk. Which I think is, we could do things with distribution to make you less risk averse, and then potentially, you could be more of a stakeholder in the place where you work at. I think that's something to look into, certainly.
Well, okay.
So what are you asking for? Like, what do you see as a better role for yourself? Like, so if you owned part of the stock of this company as part of your, even perhaps a significant portion of stock, would that be something that you'd consider a better arrangement?
Okay. Not sure why you're talking about stock here. Stock is not really the concept like we deal with. Just I'm saying that the portion
ownership over the body corporation is
what?
When I say stock, I mean partial ownership over the organization that you work for. That's what stock is, basically.
I'm trying to think. I need to think about this, the way that we're phrasing this, because
I like that direction personally, right? I like the idea that people would own, like, the stockholders of the grocery store in town would be owned to a large degree by the people in town, right? And the organization that sold products would be owned by that sold commodities would be owned by a collective of farmers who farm that product, right? I like that idea. But I sort of have my eyes open to a lot of potential problems that also kind of creep in, right? It's not so simple as just saying, yes, you deserve to have a partial ownership, and then mission accomplished, right? There's a lot of ways that installing that partial ownership would backfire horribly.
Again, like, I will concede there are always problems with every economic system. I'm not. I don't know anyone who would not admit that unless they're very uneducated. But the thing, sorry, I'm trying to think of my words. Think of what I'm gonna say here. Okay.
No, I partially agree with you, right? Like, I think it's a great idea. I just, we need to be cautious, very, very cautious, right? Because it could explode.
Okay, again, I need to go back, but like this, what I'm proposing has already been implemented. A model that has already been quite successful.
Well, that should be really easy to re-implement, right?
Yes. It should be easy to implement. It should be easy to implement elsewhere, but not under the current parameters of the economic system we have. We would need to
can I ask
based
you,
around this. What I'm advocating.
Maybe we agree on this too, but what do you think is stopping your implementation of Mondragon co-ops in America?
Well, they would be based according, this whole model could be adjusted based on the industry and the company in question, based around certain principles.
Sure. But what's stopping you from saying?
What's stopping us? And if you actually, I'd highly recommend that you go Productions. If people watching this, he actually made an interesting video on this exact topic. But it is really the whole economic system around this. Like the whole right now we have an economic system which is based entirely on maximizing profits, and the difference is meant to better the rights, better.
Why would you need to participate in that? There's no law that says you have to maximize your profits.
It doesn't. That's not. It's not that there's a law or.
Are you
It's
saying
that
that no one
this-
are you saying that no one would buy your product?
What?
Are you saying no one would buy your product?
No, I'm saying that the economic system is structured around maximizing profits.
Yeah, but I don't know what that actually means, like in the real world, right? Like, I know corporations maximize their profit. Presumably, co-ops don't. But like co-ops exist, right?
Yes, but they're
So not everything maximizes their profit.
yes, but this is what the basis of the economic system is. It's
I mean, where would it fail is, I guess, my question, right?
Where would it fail? What
like you implement Mondragon and it fails when it goes bankrupt because no one bought the product. That's what I'm.
Well, that's what you're asking. Like it wouldn't necessarily fail. Of course, like there have been attempts that didn't get off the ground. Etc. Like all.
So it could work.
Yes, it could, but it could not. Like,
I'd be very interested in examining that experiment in this country.
Well, there are plenty of co-ops that exist around.
No, I know. I lived in one. I'm part of a grocery co-op.
I mean worker co-op. I'm not talking about grocery co-ops or housing co-ops. I'm talking about worker-owned businesses, worker-owned co-op. Those are what I'm talking about. That's which is quite a different situation. Your ownership is entitled based on the fact. I digress. Like what's stopping them is that their whole intention. Co-ops exist to improve the lives around them. Businesses exist to maximize profits. So that can be a bit of a limit on its own growth, so to speak. Then you get into additional issues of even getting it off the ground. I know people who are trying to start
Are you expecting co-ops to outcompete businesses? Like, I mean, if they generated a superior product, I imagine they would. Like, for instance, REI outcompeted, which is a co-op, right? It's a cooperative ownership. It outcompeted a lot of businesses.
Like it could, but that's not the only. It's not the only scenario. Co-op, like unlike I'm trying tend to produce products that because they are trying to better the lives of their members, the prices may be a bit higher, for example, which can make them and products made by other companies which might be cheaper. For example, I'm a college student. I'm working a minimum wage job over the summer to help. I can't really go for the most expensive option. That's something that I can't really receive under the current system, or can't really get under the current system.
I mean, presumably there'd be co-ops that would produce both cheap and expensive options, right? That's what you're hoping for eventually, right?
Eventually, yes, but I would also expect that exact wouldn't
it be an opportunity?
Or not wages, but
working for co-ops. That would be a great opportunity to make a workers' co-op, right? That would produce something.
And if anyone's in the KC area interested, there is an idea I have for a co-op that I would like to start, to be honest. But
that would be awesome. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's actually for flag making. As you saw when I had the video, I'm a bit of a collector myself. But I do already know quite a bit of the problems that go into that. It can be hard to get co-ops off in the first place because they, like many banks, the current banking system, many banks don't really understand them. So that can be.
What do you think banks don't understand?
Well, because co-ops are not a particularly common model, they don't really understand how it works. And
what do they need to understand?
Well, they're not going to loan to something they don't understand.
So so you want to get like a large business loan?
Like to start it, I would need a loan. Yes.
I mean, credit's pretty cheap in this country right now.
Like it's been a while since I've read some of the articles on this, but like for co-ops get
Well,
organized.
I guess I can see what you're saying. Like they
Yeah.
would examine your business model, and if they think that is a hippy dippy thing, they might not.
Yeah,
They might
because
not
they
pull
are
the trigger
not
on it.
many.
But
You know,
wouldn't if you had a successful model somewhere else, couldn't you just say we're going to do that and look how much money they made? So give us some money because we're going to copy them, and they're a successful workers co-op. So here's our business plan. You can see it in operation. Go to like Wisconsin or whatever.
Yeah. Well, like the difference is, prices that I cited earlier, they're making robots. I want to make flags. You can see why they would be like, yeah, model, but we, how, like they wouldn't really see how that exact model could be replicated in a so that can make it very complicated getting a loan for that. Sorry, trying to maintain this time of the evening, and 2 hours back. 2 hours ahead.
No, I mean, yeah. I'm a very I've have experience with working with sort of questions like this. I guess probably a lot more.
Yeah, you've had more time on this planet.
Yeah, certainly. But I guess if you were to say, I mean, if you're more on the left, I take it.
Yes, absolutely.
See, the problems I have with the left are mainly cultural.
Yeah, that much I gathered from you. But okay, God, I'm trying to think. And actually, that I think kind of yields to another topic that might be interesting. Let's just say hypothetically, like you're of the Distributist Party of America, a completely made up party. Seriously, people don't go Googling it; it doesn't exist.
No, I don't even.
But for that leader,
I'm so skeptical of.
Oh, you don't.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're gonna participate in democracy, start a party. But I think that pressuring the government through other means is a lot more effective.
So direct action?
I suppose. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, just having a lot of money, for instance, or being well organized, or doing stuff like that, it tends to get a lot better results than voting.
Oh yeah, I agree, and that's my liberal parents and I have all the time. They think, oh, voting's the only way to change things. I argue no, direct action, protest, lobbying. You got politics doesn't end on election day. That's my whole take. But hypothetically, if you were to come into power tomorrow, if we were, let's say we're a parliamentary system, you come into power tomorrow, what are your top 10 agenda items?
In this country?
Yeah, in this country.
The problem is that our problems aren't really something the federal government can fix. They're mostly cultural problems, right?
Okay.
I mean,
so
I think slowing down immigration would be helpful, and encouraging simulation would be helpful because then that would increase social cohesion. I think reforming entitlements and I mean, I guess I would say that I would implement things that redistributed wealth from individuals to families. So I don't think that there should be. I think that rich people should be highly pressured to have children. It should be very difficult to create something like Silicon Valley, where like essentially you have most of our upper middle class locked into these areas where it's impossible to start families. And I think that sort of moving into an organization where we support individual responsibility and individual control over wealth, essentially make it easier to buy homes, make it easier to gain control of your children's education so that you're the one who controls it, make it easier for, I'm plain tax people a lot and redistribute it to people. Earned income tax credit essentially should be massively expanded.
I agree with that.
Stop me when you want to. I mean, I think
tax credit needs to be expanded for especially poor and working families.
I think that people should be penalized for not having children too, because it's another way that children are a tax on people who have children to people who don't have children. They're massively expensive, and our welfare system dies without them. So so you pour like $1 million into this. You pour more money into your children than you pour into taxes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the children, like, the investment the parents pay into the children largely controls how the children become earners of taxes later on, right? Or become earners in taxpayers later on. So it's basically like this hugely perverse incentive, right? So, I mean, I don't know. Eliminate perverse incentives. I mean, can I ask you? There's something specific you want to get at, right? I can't just prattle off a whole political platform at every level.
Yeah, I got you.
Right? Like, are you talking about tax policy? Are you talking about foreign policy? Are you talking about education?
General policies. Why don't let's flip the script here. This might be easier. So let's say that my hypothetical, sadly non-existent Democratic Socialist Party comes into power tomorrow. Like our first priorities would be set up a single-payer healthcare system, improve access to education and education funding, and establish free college tuition. Establish a program to help expand social ownership and co-ops, similar to what similar law they have in Italy, which is a issue that we can discuss later.
What I wouldn't do there.
What
is that? What you're asking me?
Like, what are some of these policies? Like, say you guys.
I certainly would not create free college tuition because I'm not so sure what that would accomplish. A lot of these college degrees aren't earning back the money that's being poured into them to a large degree, right? They're not giving you skills that you'll use in a workplace, right?
So would you say, like, maybe expand trade school option, structure a whole?
I think that.
Would you restructure? So would you like make our?
I would totally restructure education for the.
So like maybe do something a bit more like what they do in Sweden does this. I know Iran does this, where once you get to like your high school level, they put you on a track that sets you on.
I think that there needs to be experimentation with this. There needs to be local experimentation with this idea. It can't be something that the federal government does for everybody, because frankly, what I would want would have to be experimented with. And how can I know if it works if I haven't tried it out first, right?
Yeah, I think there are possibilities with that. And let's say we're
this is the other thing. I'm not looking to like I said, my problems are like I have huge problems with how we structure our educational system. Our educational system is corrupt to the core, right? Like, so I could go on forever about that particular thing. But when it comes to like how people are handled in middle school and high school, I mean that's a whole other can of beans. And furthermore, I mean, it could vary regionally. I think that the way that children are handled in environments where they come from small communities and everyone's a farmer is very different than how you'd handle children who come from the inner city of Chicago. And the idea that you take one policy for that and superimpose it on all these different areas, I don't even know. It sounds like it couldn't work, essentially.
Of course, like that, I do think that education policy does need significant devolution. What works for a school district out in the suburbs of Kansas City, what works for our school district will not necessarily work for school districts out in Western Kansas, for example. I agree with that, but at the same time, like there does need to be some like with devolution, you still does need to go up to a bit more of a higher authority.
I don't know. What do you mean by that?
Like a state, like how even evolved down into school, into school districts in, right now, they do still go up to the state government. They're
fine. I mean, for funding, right?
What?
I mean, ultimately, the people who decide whether it's doing a good job are the parents and the individuals at the local level, right?
Okay.
I think they should get funding from wherever they want, but the power should be downwards, right? Should be pushed downwards. That's the idea of distributism.
So school choice?
Push the power. I mean, I don't know, whatever you want to say. That the parent should have control over their children's education, and they should be the ones who make the decisions because they have the investment more than people who are bureaucrats in the state.
So would you move to a voucher system?
I think it's, like I said, experimentation, right? We don't know what works. But I do know the people who have skin in the game tend to make a lot better decisions than the people who are too vested in the outcomes of the individual children. I know that this is, we can see this again and again in sociological research, right? When we take account of wealth out of the picture, the people who have strong families are the people who do well in school. I mean, of course, if you're a billionaire and you're a billionaire with a broken family, you'll still do well, right?
Yes.
But not everyone's going to be a billionaire, right? There's not enough money in the country. So the second best option, accounting for that, is the involvement of the family, and there's no replacement for that, right? You can't. There's no amount of money. You're not going to be able to compensate for a strong family, which is why I say most of these problems are cultural.
To some degree, I think that there is a point that can be made for cultural problems, and I would say serious cultural problems as well. And I hate to, for a non-Marxist, I hate to start citing Gramsci and the Frankfurt School, but those Gramsci and the Frankfurt School did point out a lot of these things, the cultural problems that we do have under capitalism, and like I think there are different.
It's odd. Most people don't think the Frankfurt School is particularly pro-family.
I'm not. The Frankfurt School is very difficult to digest. If you try reading Adorno, he's very hard to read.
Adorno. I mean, my favorite Twitter accounts is that one, like 9 University Twitter account.
I'll have to look into that one actually.
It's a joke account it has Adorno's face on it, and it's a parody of a Frankfurt School philosopher, right?
Yeah.
It's all these indiscernible aphorisms, and it's hilarious, right? I think it's done by a PhD student, because
sounds like
nothing could be that clever if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But at any rate, yeah, sure.
They did criticisms of family structure that I'm again, I don't agree with everything they say, but they did point out some serious. I do think that capitalism as a system does have can be slightly detrimental to family structures in of themselves, and
what do you mean by capitalism? That's always a vague term.
What?
The thing is, I very rarely know what people mean by capitalism.
I probably should have opened by defining this. An economic system based on private ownership of the means of production, in which the resources are distributed in a market system for profit making, and workers are compensated with wages.
So it does involve a marketplace.
Capitalism does involve it, yes. Capitalism, so that's how, the reason I do that is that's how to distinguish, say, capitalism from, other, you have to have those 3 criteria, in my opinion, to distinguish capitalism from slavery and feudalism.
So when you say you don't like capitalism, do you not like the market? Do you not like the primarily ownership? Because it seems to me that is a private ownership, essentially.
No, it's a form of social ownership. It is,
and same it's kind of social ownership.
No, corporation is private ownership. Because a co-op is owned by all.
A co-op seems to me like a corporation where the shares are equally distributed. It's just a question.
All its workers, among all its workers, and
it's more widely distributed.
Yes, but a corporation is not based on the same principles as that. Really, it's collective ownership versus private ownership. There, a co-op is still a form of among a certain group in a certain workplace. A corporation would not be, based on those principles.
It's a little unclear to me, but at any rate,
yeah. I mean, again, the book I recommended earlier, Democracy at Work: A Cure for Capitalism, really good read on that. I recommend it. It's
I wonder how it would read to somebody who doesn't like democracy very much.
I don't know. You'll have to read it and find out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I have a reading list.
Yeah, I do too.
I have this guy. It's.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess the thing is, I think what ails the West right now is culture. I mean, I think that we're headed for some serious crises. I think that a lot of the financial systems are going to crumble away, and we'll see what's powerful enough to seize power in the absence of these systems like the EU. Right? I think the EU is functionally on its deathbed.
To some degree, I would say, yeah, to some degree, it definitely is.
I
have an interesting
similar situation in 20 years, actually.
Pardon?
I think the United States might be in a similar position in 20 years. It might have active separatist movements in there, for instance.
Well, there are active separatist movements in Europe right now, and
absolutely.
Yeah, and I sympathize very heavily with them. I've been to Catalonia, I've been to the Basque Country, and I do favor independence for those. I'll admit my initial political involvement started through my study of history, in particular Irish history, and the Irish struggle for self-determination. Okay. Oh, wow. There's going to be a lot of interesting videos to make after this one based on the comment thread. Sorry, see if there's anything interesting to touch on there. So, I think that the EU is, in the long term, will either need to completely restructure, or it is, at the current rate, it is doomed to internal collapse. And I think the Eurozone probably should be gradually.
It's going to be an interesting question what emerges from this, because I think a bunch of very malevolent entities will. I think a number of very aggressive entities will, in fact, as well.
Okay. I've got my mind split in two places here, looking at the comments and trying to listen to you at the same time. No, it's mostly it's really digressed a lot. It's really only 3 people, and it's not so much. I increasingly believe that arguing with socialists is argue with their imaginary friend called capitalism. What? That's just one of the comments there by Brainwright, and that is a pretty ridiculous comment.
I think he means that capitalism is a poorly defined boogeyman that's responsible for all evils, right? So
I would say
socialists use capitalism like Christians use
capitalism is not responsible for all evil. What?
I've heard the accusation that socialists use capitalism like like radical Christians use the devil, right? Or Nazis use the Jews, right? Why is this problem in society? Capitalism. There's very few problems that socialists don't blame on capitalism, right? Like you're just saying about the family, right? There's people from the Frankfurt School who are commenting on the family. I bet they blame capitalism, right?
To some degree, but I do.
Yeah, I didn't even read those books, and I could already tell. Capitalism, right? So that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, but most most social I know don't blame absolutely everything on capitalism. We are highly critical of it, but there are other forces at play. A lot of the other things that we like to criticize, like racism and all those things, predate capitalism. Only began to develop with the industrial age. Meanwhile, racist attitudes predated that, and I can send you an article that blames witchcraft craze of the 1500s on capitalism. Okay, well, yeah, some people are stupid, Brainwright. That's that on hysteria based on poor theology, but it's
well, I guess that's the criticism. I mean, I'm sure not all socialists fall into it, but that is there's something with the alt-right too. If you go to an alt-right person, every problem is the Jews. It's like,
oh yeah,
spoiler alert, the Jews did it, and with some socialists, spoiler alert, capitalism did it. But the thing is, once any group is responsible for everything, the ideology ceases to communicate a lot of information, right? Because the system is so vaguely defined, it either becomes utopian by saying that if we just get rid of this one principle, everything will fix itself, which is not true, or it becomes a conspiracy theory, in some of the radical elements of the alt-right. And
I even some of the cultier elements of the far left, like RevCom, the Revolutionary Communist Party USA, they've for them it's really become just everything is capitalism. It's homosexuality was blamed on capitalism up until about the early 2000s by Revcom.
Oh yeah.
Which is
no, there was actually a huge amount of communist literature from
yeah.
the late 19th and early 20th century. That
the Soviet Union, yeah. It's like, I find that some people are, has there ever been a coherent curriculum to teach capitalism? Yes, at multiple universities. There has been. Just look online. Anyway, people, and then, like, you know, I will hear.
By the way, if you're new to live streaming, what I would do is I would set aside a specific time to read through the comments.
Probably, I am kind
of do it. But I think switching back and forth, it makes the conversation sort of seem distracted, and
it is, yeah,
and that will encourage people to come on to get a rise out of the people who are talking. So
yeah,
future reference, that's something that might, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Like,
yeah, that's actually
like 20 minutes at the end where you go through the comments, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. This is only the second live stream I've ever done, and the first one was a hastily done live stream with other YouTube leftists. Won on the British election.
I find live streams a lot of fun, but
they are. I'm having a lot of fun. Yeah, should be some other evening plans.
So yeah, I think if you want radical and violent change, I think you're living.
Oh, I don't want violent.
Period. Well, I think all radical change is violent. I think that I almost suspect that when there isn't violence along with the change, then it isn't very radical. I think that. So I think if you want that, I think you're living at the right time period for it. I know I'm a pessimist. Everyone tells me I'm a pessimist. But
idea for a little while. I'll have to think on that for a few days. That's an interesting concept. Because now that I think about, and I'll have to, read, because there's always been a violent reaction, at least, like, even if the change itself was not made violently, so to speak, it was made maybe legislatively, there was still a violent reaction. That the civil rights movement, that was the movement itself endorsed nonviolence, and the changes were made through the legislature. You did have a violent reaction from the KKK and other groups like that. So you do have a bit of a point there. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, and I think the civil rights era was. I mean, it was changes that were done with the broad cooperation of most of the United States leadership, and it was a very small minority kind of resisting that large trend of the leadership class. Or, I mean, I'm sure there were large sections of the South that didn't like it, but those people...
Well, even a large majority of even Black aligned with Dr. King, especially, and that and that was mostly actually after his he came out but like there among white liberals there was significant opposition to the changes.
Opposition to the speed at which the change was accomplished, not the actual change itself.
Yeah, and some of the methods and other things.
That's the thing, right? Like, and if you're saying that we have most people think that this should happen, they just think that it should happen more slowly, and then it happens more fastly. I don't consider that radical change. Radical change is when you want A to happen and the exact opposite of A happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you live in Turkey right now. I know some specialists live in Turkey.
Yeah.
Let's say he goes full Islamist government on you.
Joins the PKK or something. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not PKK. I'm talking about Turkish socialists, not Kurdish socialists.
Well, or they're.
Let's say you're a secular socialist living in Istanbul right now. They're communist, and Erdogan goes, okay, this is the caliphate now. Which I wouldn't be surprised at some stage if he.
Oh yeah, he's gonna do that.
But that's radical. That's radical. That's not like, oh, I wanted a caliphate in like 30 years, but I mean, this is too fast. I mean, introduce the caliphate slowly, and then the caliphate comes quickly. That's not radical. Something you absolutely.
I'm not sure he's going to introduce the caliphate, but he's going to. Well, he wants to be dictator.
I'm being a little hyperbolic, but
yeah, I get my
point. Radical is when something that you would fight against violently seizes power in an organization that you're intimately involved in.
Okay.
Not when some change that eventually is going to happen comes 10 years before it would happen. Like gay marriage is a good example. Like gay marriage was a foregone conclusion. It happened really fast. but it wasn't radical because all of our leadership class knew that gay marriage was going to happen. And if you were a betting man and bet against gay marriage, you were a very stupid person, or at least you didn't pay attention to sociological trends.
Yeah.
I happen to. I mean, I'm obviously an Orthodox Catholic, so I don't believe in gay marriage. But I mean, it's radical. It's a radical motion, right? It's a big departure from how Christians have always thought of sexuality. But it was not radical in how it came about. It came about as a ordinary function of government with very little opposition from
long-term cultural shift.
Yeah.
I got you.
Radical change.
Yeah, I got you. I would like that's actually an interesting way of thinking of things. Like I might change the terminology, but to some degree,
if you're interested as a leftist, in like a serious, crazy blog poster, it's pretty much a book length thing. But if you want to seriously challenge your opinions, I would encourage you to read Mencius Mollbug's Letter to an Open-Minded Progressive.
Who wrote a Letter to an Open-Minded Progressive by who?
Mencius Mollbug.
Smallbug. Okay, let me write that down. I'll have to check. I'll have to look into that one. But minded progressive. Okay. So yeah. Okay, so I need to think of another. So I want to get your take. You're moving back to the Catholicism angle on on solutions to climate change, because that would be because of course that's a very big issue, and
I have a lot to say about this.
Cyclical, which I have a copy of right here.
I'm actually very aware of. I had there was a time when I read extensively about climate change science, and I mean there's two numbers you need to know. How much is their GDP going to drop per parts per million? So how much is their GDP going to drop per changes degrees Celsius of climate in 100 years? And how much carbon leads to a subsequent increase in Celsius? And then how much, and these are all very mathy terms, and then how much does a decrease of carbon emission globally hurt global GDP?
GDP?
I mean, I know, how would you measure
so
the impact
economic
of change?
Like there are a number of ways, physical man of it, heat waves, weather events, etc., temperature rise, and then that's
the result of it, right? But how would you measure the impact to humans, right?
Like I would, like there are observable, and I would say GDP, like the impacts are like probably the best way in my opinion, and maybe which probably would be a contributor to GDP. So maybe I'd have to look into that one as well. But let's try and focus maybe a bit on solutions here.
Sure. Well, here's the thing. It can't be something that looks like Paris, because Paris does not target supply chains. I give this thought experiment, right? So you're aware of how Paris is set up, right?
Yeah.
So Paris essentially requires, and if any treaties that we currently have on the table for climate change look a lot like Paris, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what Paris essentially does is it says that Europe and North America, but not really South America, have to make incredibly large cuts in carbon emissions, which they never have accomplished in the past.
Yeah.
And in exchange, China, India, South Asia, and other countries have to essentially make no cuts.
Okay, I'm actually going to have to stop you there. That's not what the Paris Agreement actually says. The Paris Agreement allows countries to set their own limit on climate and only really binds countries to keep below a certain point.
How much is China bound to cut carbon emissions?
It's not bound to cut anything by it. It's not a...
Probably not, is my guess.
No country is bound. No country is bound by it. It's not a binding treaty. It doesn't set carbon limit.
Okay, so let's say this. I think we're just haggling over the definition of what the treaty is. There's no enforcement mechanism, really. Here's the question: do you think China is going to radically reduce its carbon emissions?
It's already doing it.
No, it's not. By what measurement are you measuring China reducing its carbon emissions?
The amount of energy that it's producing not using basically green technology is the main.
No, that's
right
a
now.
terrible measurement, right? Because if I build 10 coal power plants, let's say I live in a country that has one, solar panel and 3 coal power plants, and then I build 20 coal power plants and 2 more solar panel factories. Have I decreased my carbon emission?
Actually, shoot. Sorry, I'm trying to Google that because I remember seeing a statistic on that about being built by China.
Coal power plants.
By China. I need to Google that. They canceled 103 new coal power plants and haven't planned any new ones. Sorry, 104. And they're cutting their reliance on it by 2/3.
They're cutting their reliance. First of all, they could be switching to diesel, which is much more, which is another energy source, or nuclear. Well, I think nuclear would be a good thing. But what article are you citing for this? This is the problem with having these things. My impression, and the last time I saw statistics on this was a few years ago, China's carbon output was skyrocketing, and they were investing heavily in coal power plants.
This is NYT this year.
Okay, so is the claim that China's carbon is decreasing, its emission yearly is decreasing?
But I was just pointing out that
But you think that it is?
They are moving in that direction.
What does that mean?
They're moving. This is a clear indicator, along with other signs about reliance on green energy, that they are moving away from dirty energy.
There's no such thing as dirty energy. There's just the pounds per carbon that a country generates. I mean, is nuclear dirty energy? I mean, it's just a buzzword. I mean, there is the amount of carbon it takes to produce
fossil fuels. If that's a better terminology for you.
Fossil fuels. This is in contradiction to everything that I've heard. I don't have my papers up, but my impression is that
hello?
Yeah, my impression is that China's emissions are skyrocketing right now. But so what targets do you think? I mean, there's a question of the global climate change policy has to be set on supply chains, not on countries. Which is why I disagree with Paris.
What would this policy look like?
Taxes on supply chains, on every element of the supply chain.
So, like reducing and the transportation, etc.
Well, not really, because transportation isn't the issue. Manufacturing is mostly the issue.
Manufacturing?
Yeah. Like your car, for instance, most of the carbon goes into the car when it's manufactured.
Like, I have to look into that, but like I would like. So your policy on that would be been at the manufacturing level, and how would that be done?
Taxes, essentially. I mean, I don't know.
So carbon tax.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, man. There's no way we're going to radically cut our carbon emissions. The way that you would need, in my opinion, to decrease even a degree Celsius of warming over the next 100 years.
I'd have to disagree there.
What threshold of parts per million do you think we're going to avoid?
Give you an exact number again. Not a climate scientist here. I'm poli-sci and history student. But
okay, I have the World Bank's data on China's CO2 emissions, not how many factories they're building, because that's deceptive, right?
Yeah.
You can, like I said, you can build, and their CO2 emissions went from 2.885 metric tons per capita in 2000.
Yeah.
7.551 in 2011.
Yeah, and then
they post
they
this in the link. It's almost a threefold increase, and that's per capita. So that's 1 billion people.
Then here's some. Here, give me a sec. Where are we? Okay. Is it in the chat? Or
yeah, well, it says I can't post web addresses in the chat. I can post it in the quick link bar.
Which quick link bar?
You know what an issue about this too is that, like, I mean, are we going to be the other issue here is that this is a
here it is.
Research. I put it in the chat to you.
Yeah, I just got it right now.
That's the relevant issue, not how many factories they're building, how much carbon they're emitting, right?
Give me a sec. This is numbers on my iPad here. I'll see if because I'm trying to do all this stuff on 2 different devices, that would indicate that in 2015, and I need to, current data indicates that they saw a decrease in CO2 emissions in 2015 of 0.7% decrease, and that decrease increased to 2.5 in 2016.
I imagine they're slowing down because they set aside most of their energy needs at this point, right? But that's not going to. That doesn't mean that they're going to stop. I mean, how much would you need them to cut in order to save a degree centigrade in 100 years? Is my question.
I do not.
How many hundreds parts per million do you? I mean, like it used to be when I was your age, right? The left was telling us that 300 parts per million was the maximum we could allow in our atmosphere. Right now, people are saying that, you know, we can't have anything higher, that we should target getting less than 400 parts per million.
Yeah, because you've already passed 350. So.
Oh yeah, like a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the most prudent strategy at this stage is adaptation.
Okay, so this actually, that actually is a good thing to bring up then. So, like, of course, a lot of the countries that are being the worst hit are, you know, the poorest. Bangladesh, the Maldives, they're seeing their country sink before us. So
well, I don't know.
What should
they're sinking? They're sinking because of weather change patterns, right?
What?
I mean, they're suffering from weather change patterns, not rising oceans.
Maldives?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's
they're sinking.
No, the Maldives. The Maldives. There's might be one island in the Maldives. There's been a 1 foot of sea level rise in the 20th century. 1 foot, not 21.
I'm doing this in the other up here.
How much sea level rise has there been? Let's look at that. Would that help?
There's been only a foot, but they are already.
Yeah, that sounds in keeping with what I remember reading in the IPCC. There are very few islands.
Yeah, Maldives are very low level.
There are very few islands that are 1 foot above sea level. Okay, but let's presume that there are. Well, I think we could use money to compensate those people and relocate them, right?
Yeah. So what would like your plan be? Like, should that be
monetarily?
So like where should they be? Just resell in other nations, or should they be like, or should other countries?
I think you can relocate them to other islands in the Maldives. Personally,
you could relocate them where?
To other islands in the Maldives.
I
don't think. I think the amount of areas that are hurt by. I mean, let's say that next century, right? We get another foot of sea level rise. There's not going to be too much displacement of human populations. Moreover, we can use things like dikes to essentially guard against that small and slow sea level rise. They do this in the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands, for instance, are a large degree below sea level.
So I'm looking at the numbers on the Maldives, but yeah. So, like, with the UN is saying that within the next, the whole of the Maldives will be uninhabitable thanks to sea level rise.
By when?
The end of the century.
That's a long time.
So to relocate them, but that's the whole
easy.
of them.
It's not a very high populated area.
So, like, where would you relocate them?
I mean, you're asking me to come up.
Yeah. Okay. That's unfair of me. That's okay.
UN relocation. This is oddly specific, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. We've digressed quite significantly. But in back to the topic here, though, on Catholic social teaching, though, like, have you read the encyclical Laudato Si?
Yeah, actually, hold on. No, I read Lumen Fide. I didn't read Laudato Si.
Which one did you read?
Lumen Fide.
I've read that one too. But like here, I underlined it. Where I gotta find the right line. Okay. I forget the line, but basically the whole. I would highly recommend this to everybody watching, though. The whole point of it is getting onto one of the points of Catholic social teaching, which is caring for our shared, for our common home. And what action in this one is calls for policies to be reshaped from the current ones, including focus around mass economic growth at the expense of the environment to higher prioritization of the environment, calls on countries like the United States to pay a greater share, rich countries that have contributed a large portions of it to pay for, the transition and for adaptation, as you things of that nature. What is your take on this?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like a thing more for policymakers.
Okay, enough.
I mean, you want us to discuss specific policy around relocation and adaptation efforts?
We already. I think we should move on from that one. I think I may have pushed you on too hard on that one, and I'm sorry for that.
Fine. I mean, I'm not really an expert on relocations inside the Indian Ocean. I mean, there is actually a lot of space on. I mean, like, for instance, I'll give you an example, right? There's a huge amount of prime real estate on the East African coast, which is not too far away from the Maldives, right? It's uninhabitable because that place is tearing itself apart on civil war.
East Africa.
Are they still going to be
like what?
Are still going to be each other? I'm talking about Somalia.
What country? Oh, Somalia. Okay, I was thinking Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and I'm like, they're not. Are they still?
Mozambique and Zimbabwe, which are incredibly. Well, Zimbabwe is a perfect example, right? That used to be a rich country. It's a basket case now.
Well, yeah,
in 100 years, it's either going to still be a basket case or it might be a rich country. If it's a rich country, if South Africa is a rich country, the situation with the Maldives looks a lot different than if Africa is still a basket case in 100 years.
Back onto the topic, though, of so you would say like resolving the conflicts there would be an important first step.
What
in Somalia?
No, I can't resolve. No one can resolve Africa's conflicts.
Of course,
Africa.
Of course,
this is the thing.
We're speaking generic. I can't.
Yeah, but we in the first we talk about these things like we need to resolve Africa's problems. Well, gee, what are Africa's problems? Well, they have policies that are totally irresponsible and they're corrupt to the core, right? Like, I guess they shouldn't do that, right? But I'm not so sure what I can do about it, right?
Of course, yeah.
I mean, like, Zimbabwe is the perfect example of that, right? Like, Zimbabwe used to be a rich country. And so I feel like a lot of these things, it's like we're talking about hypothetically fixing these problems, but I think that, I think in 50 years we're not going to be talking about the Maldives. We're going to be talking about Europe going into a civil war. And civil wars emitted a lot of carbon. And I don't think anyone's going to care, right?
I think that European Union is on the verge of collapse. I'm not sure that it will be full-on civil war. Like even Northern Ireland, where there's is at risk. I'm not sure that there's the threat of violence.
I think it'll be fights between new populations and old ethnic ones.
So you're talking like race war here?
No, ethnic war just generally, right?
Okay. Like, okay, that's definitely not within the parameters of the topic that we had.
No, I'm not commending this. I'm just saying that I think that we're sitting on top of a catastrophe right now, right? I mean, you can criticize me for being pessimistic about this, but I don't look at Europe and see an optimistic place. I see Europe teetering on the top of an economic collapse. And what happens after the economic collapse? Well, people are going to be grabbing power and trying to keep each other away from grabbing power.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's something that we have a lot more control over, right? I guess we don't really. We're Americans, but I think that the real catastrophe that we face in the 21st century is global political instability, not 2 or 3 feet of sea level rise.
That's a very interesting position to take. I'm thinking about that. That's.
It's pessimistic, but it's my honest opinion, right?
Well, I was gonna think that's because I know pessimists on climate change, but interesting viewpoint in general.
I mean, do you think it's going to raise? I think some people think it's going to raise 20 feet, right? Climate change or something like that.
I just go with I'm not sure how. Again, not the scientist. I just listen to what what scientists are saying we need to do, and they're saying we gotta stop we gotta stop using fossil fuels as fast as possible, et cetera, et cetera.
You see, that's the thing. No one's going to stop using fossil fuels. It's reducing the use of fossil fuels. We have almost no energy sources, sans nuclear, at this stage that could cause us to just go off of fossil fuels. Like when I was your age, people were telling me that solar power would be the new energy, in 10 years. But it's been 10 years, and it's not.
Is gonna what?
I said, when I was your age, people were telling me that solar would be the most efficient power source in 10 years. But 10 years came and went, and it's not.
Well, that actually gets us back to the topic of economics, actually, because I would say that reason is not it definitely has to do more with economic forces at play than it does with anything else.
We need a certain amount of energy to keep our economies running, regardless of how we measure that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying cut cold turkey. We need to have a timeline to do that. I would say
cut all energy consumption or what?
Cut carbon emissions.
But carbon emissions are linked to most of our energy sources. That's the problem.
Yes. And so
how much of our energy are we going to have to cut? That's the problem here, right? You're seeing that's why cutting carbon doesn't make any sense, right? Or it does. You can reduce the carbon consumption, right? But right now we don't really have a lot of alternatives other than just going back to the 19th century or something like that, right?
Actually, we do have quite a lot of technology. Yes.
I'm willing to hear it. That matches the energy output of something like fossil fuels at this stage. What type of energy are you thinking of? What energy source are you thinking of?
A pretty broad variety: solar, wind, hydrotech.
Hydrotech. We don't have enough places to build new hydro dams, right? Those are limited by geography.
So we can't
just dam more rivers, right? But
tech,
solar is not efficient. Like I said before, solar you can't get enough energy out of that stuff to rival the kind of demands that we have. And neither really with wind either, right? Like, you know, I guess you could offset this a little bit, but it's way more expensive. That's the thing. I mean, I guess you could say like, well, we could do what Germany did and pay a lot more for energy. But the problem is that they can do that largely because they have manufacturing sources in China. They can essentially we can essentially export our energy to China, which at a global level we really can't do anymore. I don't know. We're arguing over economics, and you know that's never really the place you want to be.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was kind of the whole point of this discussion: economic systems. Okay. Well, given the time, actually, it's getting. I do have to work tomorrow, and this discussion has gone on for pretty long. Yeah, I think that
we should talk about culture sometime. I mean, I think that's the more interesting topic.
We'll have to see. I'm not as educated on that. Sorry, a fly started to go in my face there. We'll have to talk. We'll have to see about that. I'm not sure, but thanks to the Distributist for being here. Thanks everyone. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Check out his channel. He actually has some interesting videos. I don't always agree with him on a lot of issues, but you know, he does have. Yeah, but I thought his new atheism video. I thought that was quite interesting. So yeah, please check that out.
I apologize for being such a pessimist, but that's my nature.
Yeah, it's the first time I've done this, so I'm not going to say this wasn't a debate, so I'm not going to say that we won or lost. Yeah, this is just a dialogue. But Distributist, thanks to everyone watching. If you are watching, please hit that subscribe button. Check out the Distributist channel. If you want to help my channel, I have a Patreon, so please consider giving. I need to get some better equipment. Check out my other videos. Thanks. Thanks to the Distributist, and have a great night.